Welcome back to the Art of Basil. This is Ordinary People Doing Extraordinary Things, where we highlight everyday people whose work leaves an extraordinary mark. Today, I'm sitting down with Professor and artist Dinizulu Gene Tinnie, an educator, cultural designer, and historian whose art and exhibits help preserve stories that deserve to be seen, not forgotten. From his roots in the South Bronx to a lifetime of research on public art in South Florida, Gene has been connecting history, identity, and community in powerful ways. Thank you, Gene, for sitting down and having this conversation with me. Let's get into it.
I'll say this about the South Bronx. It's not, to kind of put context on this. It seems after World War II, my late brother was a good historian of this. He really did a lot of research. But it seems after World War II, as in a lot of other places, um, the South Bronx was the beautiful Bronx. It was this place of opportunity. The street I grew up on, I would find out later was kind of exceptional, and the block I grew up on, in that it was so diverse. You had black folks from the South, black folks from the West Indies, from the Caribbean, like my parents, Puerto Rican people, Jewish, Irish, Italian. You didn't have any Asian people. They were the only, and no indigenous. But that was the world as we understood it. We thought, the kids you played with would, looked all kind of ways, and was, so in that environment, I was kind of, I was more on the nerdy side. I mean, I wasn't, no, fast athletic kid or nothing like that. Like science and art and, just being fascinated with learning and I would say exploring. Like when we got old enough to have bicycles, my brother and I, well, even before that, by walking, I mean, we would just discover the Bronx. And when I go back there, I still recognize that there are places in the Bronx that I never knew about. And I think that's the way it is with a lot of big cities or any place. There are these, when you really break it down, there's so much more going on than we think. So that's kind of what that was. As far back as I can remember, my brother and I, we were 13 months apart, so we were close. And if there was paper or pencils or blank walls available, we would be doing our thing, much to our parents' consternation. I mean, at one point they said, "Look, you can't draw on the walls," and by the time I got to elementary school, I got to be, sort of the class artist. So, Thanksgiving comes, you got to draw the Pilgrims, and you draw the Vikings, and you draw all these things that we learned about, other than about us. As they say, if you're not learning about you, you're not being educated. And that was that. And I think one of the department stores even, had sponsored art classes, and I got the scholarship to go to that. So there was a little bit of recognition, but as time went on, I don't think I ever had the idea of actually being an artist. Like that's what you do, and part of that, of course, comes from the fact that here in the States, we're taught to think very one-dimensionally about careers and who we are and what we are. That you go to other places like Europe, and you find out that this guy who's a literary critic is also a full-time pediatrician who conducts his symphony orchestra on the weekends, and nobody thinks that he's extraordinary, But I digress. So, I didn't really do much artistically in junior high, high school, college, and kind of once I got into college, well, my original plan was, I had this idea of being a dentist, and so with the whole pre-dental, and then I found out that some of those courses were not cut out for me, and vice versa. But I did recognize that I, had, good facility with learning language, and I was taking French. It was chosen for me rather than me choosing it, but it worked. And so I decided to just change to language because I just had much more interest in that, linguistics, and where words come from, and all of that. And once I selected that, it was sort of just a common sense thing that when it came time to do graduate work, I would have to figure out a way to do that in the place, in France itself. And it turned out that worked out. I got a grant to go, Fulbright, and was able to stay 2 years there. That's where, even before I went, I was very interested in just being there, seeing art and architecture, Gothic cathedrals, and that. I mean, I had a real fascination with those, and of course that was a whole cultural shock because, first day, we found out about an art exhibit. We go to this little museum. The line is 3 blocks long. There's guys, literally, ditch diggers in the street. They're, shall we say, crude by American standards, but such as, using the wheelbarrow as the restroom, all that kind of thing, right in the public. And, I finally get into the exhibit. Because of my height, I'm able to, thank goodness, I could see over people because it was so jam-packed. And by the time I make the full circuit, lunchtime has come, and the people online allowed these same guys, ditch diggers, to come in, and they're walking through the exhibit commenting on the quality of brushwork and all this. And I'm saying, okay, all right, this is... I almost needed a place to sit down because I'm saying, okay, this is a whole different cultural, milieu than anything, I mean, we're taught that, like art appreciation and opera and all these, that this is some kind of snobbish thing for the rich. And, opera is working class entertainment. This is, this is the people's culture. It's the, so I would say that was almost like the second most valuable takeaway. I guess the most valuable one was being there as a student, and back in the day when you could do such things, and a lot of people did it. When we had breaks in the semesters and so forth, get on the road, just hitchhike, and good way to meet people, go different places. And I'll compress a story. One guy picked me up. He asked me what I do. I said, I'm a student. He says, no, what do you do? I said, well, I'm a teacher in the United States. No. I mean, then he explains that, look, he sells school supplies. You see all that stuff in the car. But what he does, he writes music. And much like what you were saying, if, they have a piano, he sings songs with his family. Whether this gets published or goes anywhere, it didn't matter. And I said, I'm like, well, yeah, okay, yeah. Well, I used to do art. And the guy looks at me, he almost runs off the road. You used to do art? Like, are you telling me you actually know how to do art and you're not doing it? And I said, okay, I see. This is one of these moments in life. Okay. And when we departed, I said, being a salesman may not be what you do, but you're one hell of a salesman, because this conversation was life-changing. And like once something is in you, we got back, started the school year, grad school, Then I decided, I want to just try drawing. And I actually still have it. And I was like, well, that worked out okay. And from there, then it was just kind of growth, not necessarily steady, but so by the time I got back to the States, finished my master's degree in New York, got a job in California, moved to Boston, and then relocated. By the time I decided to come to Miami, I said, okay, look, this thing has gone from interest to hobby to sideline to let's just go ahead and do this, try the art thing and see how far it flies. So that's the long answer to your short question. At some point, I can't say for sure when, as I became more interested in art, and a lot of it was just doing abstract, just colors and shapes and so forth. I started learning about the Harlem Renaissance, which I had really not known about. And I was living in Boston. There was, it's now called, I believe, the National Center of African American Art and Culture or something like that. Back then it was called the Elma Lewis School. Elma Lewis was this remarkable, dynamic woman who, brought this thing into existence. It was inspiring to so many people. People would work there. Their paychecks would be weeks late, and they'll just figure out a way. They shared her dedication. And I got an announcement in the mail about a show coming up of Elizabeth Catlett. I had not known about Elizabeth Catlett, and it was that sculpture of hers where there's a black man's head at one end of the board, and there's like the crosshairs of a target. And just that image was so compelling. I said, I need to go see this. And I went to see the exhibit and was like, how did I never know about this woman? I mean, the work, and then of course I find out, she's world famous, and actually, one of the great gifts in life was that we were actually able to bring her here to Miami, and spend some time. So experiences like that helped. And the fact that when I got here, very fortuitously, leaving Boston, which I knew I was not going to spend the rest of my life there, I mean, my people are from the tropics. I need to be where palm trees grow. So fortuitously, this love connection came about, and the lady, she was from Florida. She was living in Miami. I said, well, I knew I was planning to move somewhere in the South because that was part of what I was beginning to grasp was that if we're going to just understand who we are as individuals or as a society or as a culture, there's probably no way to do that without understanding the South, because the South was, we're in the semi-quincentennial year of the Declaration of Independence. 56 men, 41 were slaveholders. I mean, the South is what shaped the country. And so I knew I wanted to go south. I didn't know if it was going to be Georgia or North Carolina, or, places where I had some contact. And it turned out that Miami became the place. And when I got here, fortuitously, there was a group that my lady friend introduced me to called the Miami Black Arts Workshop in Coconut Grove. That was just one of those marriages made in heaven. I joined them, they joined me. And then, of course, by that time, I was very much coming out of a lot of activism. So linking art to culture was, nothing new. I mean, like even for a lot of events and things that we did, I would be the one to, design the flyers and posters and things like that. So, yeah. So that those things sort of fused, rather easily. And then, of course, the more we learned about the culture, the more inspiration we can derive from it. And then the key moment, not too long after I got to Miami, I don't think I was here, it was 3 weeks at the most. I'm in this bookstore. I kind of challenged them, like, where's the black section? And they go around the corner. And I, oh my God, okay, I got to come back here because they just had so much good stuff. And on the way out, I'm passing this table, cocktail table books and so forth. I see this book about history of American sailing ships. And I say, yeah, right. They'll have every sailing ship except the ones that brought, excuse me. I open up the thing and there's a whole chapter on privateers and slavers. And this was by Howard Chappell, who was the longtime maritime historian at the Smithsonian. And so it was like one of those classic books. As I'm looking through this chapter on privateers and slavers, since the book was really about how ship design evolved, so there's a lot of these kind of blueprint type drawings. And there's this design plan of this slave ship called the Dos Amigos. Well, you have to be as crazy as I was, as nerdy as I was, as whatever what it took to bring out the perfect storm. But in that same flash of a second of seeing that came the realization that, this has to be built. We have to, and the whole vision of, okay, all these other replicas have been built, Jamestown ships, Viking ships, Columbus ships, the Half Moon, the Dove, all these ships that, tell the story of European colonization one way or the other. And those ships are, they're powerful because when you actually see them, the last time I was in Jamestown, and okay, people came across the ocean in something like that, So there, and then this whole slave ship replica project was born. I was, all kinds of visions. this could be done at Hampton Institute, which by then was Hampton University. So with that, knowing that there's a need for the story of that, what they call the slave trade, the Middle Passage, the Maafa, this story, there's such a need for us to tell that story from the perspective of the people who were captured. There's such a need for the story to be told by our perspective, where it's not a chapter of history. We're talking about how does this fit into the oneness of the universe? How does it intersect with the land, with the indigenous people, the genocide, the slave? What did it take for people to survive that? Physically, mentally, spiritually, psychically, how did people who survived that get here barely alive, get restored to some kind of life, get sold to this life sentence at hard labor, no compensation, no credit. You're not just bringing your muscle, but you're bringing your skills, your culture, your knowledge, your creativity. You're bringing all the things that are making this into a viable society at all in the first place. Individually, of course, everybody is, dealing with the horrors of this, but collectively, these survivors found ways to live and love and laugh and give life to new generations and not be defeated by this. So the fact that this is, for all of the horror, that has to be acknowledged, in essence, an empowering story, because it's kind of like, I'm in here with all sorts of unfinished art pieces, and then thinking, oh my goodness, my life is I've got so much to do, this is so hard. You come from people who have survived that, and that was not the definition of who we were, because the only reason Africans were captured in the first place was not because they needed to be civilized, it was because they had demonstrable nation-building skills. When my wife and I went to Ghana with the National Conference of Artists, our venerable nationwide Black Visual Artists organization, this was, I think, in 2003. More than a few people kind of observed that the hotel we were staying in was, they were building an annex. And this was not being done with any OSHA regulations or anything. This is like what looked like bamboo scaffolding and so forth. And there was a woman, and like almost like straight out of the, these depictions of, the rapper and the baby is on her back. And her job is to carry buckets of wet concrete on her head, climb the scaffolding, give it to the guys up there, they pour it out, and they're leveling out. And she's doing this like, it's not like, oh me, oh what, it's just like, look, you're just taking care of business. And so and it's probably likely that she's got to go home and look after an elderly parent. But these are people who are just undaunted by, life. And they're bringing skills and knowledge and efficiency and spirituality. We met the mother of a good friend of ours who was a doctor here. She basically demonstrated to us how all these missionaries who came to Africa, supposedly to, enlighten and save souls, they're the ones who learn from the Africans what the real spirituality of their religion is. So this lady was devoutly Roman Catholic, way more than the Pope himself. I mean, it sounds like an exaggeration, but her and she said her friends and associates, their engagement with the teachings and carrying that into practice and creating rituals and basically building on that whole knowledge that we've always had, which is that the physical world and the spiritual world are, we don't even have that language. I mean, they're so inseparable. We get more appreciation, I think, every day of what the people who have been, maligned and low rated and dissed and marginalized, lynched and treated as though our lives are disposable. How vital these people's presence was. In fact, back when my wife and I were in our early courtship days, there was a shop in Overtown. I had my first public art commission. I say my, but it was a whole collective thing. I did the design, but a lot of us worked on carving this sculpture, which is still in Reeves Park in Overtown. And once, I had to work on it on the site no longer, once it was transported there. And so I was going back and forth. I didn't have for whatever reason, I didn't have transportation other than riding the bus. So between the park and the bus, I walked past this shop called House of Miracles. And I always wondered what it was. So this particular day, I said, well, I got a witness with me. I'm going here and find out what this is. And so it turned out that it was, Afro-Cuban Yoruba priest. It was his place. And we had a nice conversation with him. And on the way out, he had his shop set up like with a U-shaped counter. So he was on the other side of it. So we're walking toward the door, he on that side, we were on this side. And he had under the counter was like a cabinet, glass front. And he reached in, he pulled out a long cigar. And it's almost as if some spiritual thing came over him, because totally unrelated to anything we were talking about, he makes this pronouncement. He says, that whole part of history, and his English even got better, I would say, that whole part of history that we call the slave trade, with all the horror, with all the suffering, with all the death, that was the way the ancestors saw fit to bring us here, because the African presence, the African genius were absolutely required to be here to keep this from being a disaster that would have been beyond human imagination. Well, I mean, that was like, that landed like I don't even know what to compare it to, a boulder, right? I can't stop thinking about this, because all these years I said, well, we're the only people who are not here for any purpose of our own. You mean there's an actual purpose, there's an actual role that we have, and the role that we have was not to be anybody's slaves, but to be the ones that kept sanity alive. And I'm thinking about this. I'm saying, well, this is just wishful thinking. Is this just an excuse? Is this? And the more I think about it, everything bears it out. You are raping women and little girls and teaching your sons to do this sort of thing. And these are women who are feeding your babies with love and respect, knowing that you're going to try to turn them into the same kind of monsters that your parents turned you into because theirs did that. But there's just all kinds of little, not little, but examples like that. We realized, well, if we thought like they thought, this place would be nothing but a land of blood and ashes. So they, and even this whole paradigm of us and them. I mean, you have this they who think that, well, the reason they're still alive at all is because they had the guns and the violent means to control us. It doesn't dawn on them that, no, it's because we had sense enough to know that if we wiped every one of you off the planet, that would not solve our problem, because the whole idea of hating the deed, not the doers, and of course that's more of it's a collective mindset. I think within there's individuals have all different ways of thinking, but when you look at it in terms of how our presence has fit into this, and still does. It's like while everybody else is going nuts trying to get, I gotta have money, there's gold. We're the canary in the gold mine, like, the air is poison, get out of here. The gold will be here. Get out of here and save your life. And you're not listening. You're not, and then you don't want to hear the canary, so you start, well, look, what can you do, So you have to be on guard. My favorite food is seafood, various shellfish, I think, along with rice or whatever, yes. Belize and Egypt. Okay.
Okay.
Maybe Canada. It's been a long time, right. That's Canada. Yeah. As of now, what would I guess stand out as the closest thing to what people would call a signature piece is that long piece called Seven Masks of the Crossing. What I'm working on now, I have maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I kind of paused and went through here, and I think I counted something like 16 unfinished pieces. I said, okay, this is not the formula for success here. So right now, I'm working on maybe 3 or 4 simultaneously. Some will get done. There's one behind me that's almost finally finished, I think. Along the way, I actually got to a place of designing several monuments, and including a Pioneers Monument down in Richmond Heights. It needs some repair and restoration, and basically mainly new lighting. And I've got to do the work program for that, and that has taken me way too long. I just need to just get that finished, and because because it's a matter of the monument needs to look world class, and if we allow it to look in any way neglected, then it says something about an attitude toward the community. And then I noticed that there are even the Lincoln Boulevard, Olivia Edwards Boulevard, as it's been co-named, the entrance markers on the 2 ends. One of them is really in bad shape, and like, no. This is not just. This is about honoring ancestors. This is about what we pass on to future generations. So, and then since some of that is kind of out of my regular field, I've got to keep learning and guessing and, okay, we got to get the right light fixtures, we got to get the, so that makes it take a little bit longer. But yeah, but I have, you can see this kind, amidst the chaos, there's one piece that's, I think there's a sketch on the wall. It's kind of shaped like a, coffin. It's about resurrection, and it's about the middle passage. There's another one that is kind of a reprise of one I did in the past, one of those glass washboard things where we honor the washerwomen. My grandmother was one. Carter G. Woodson has a whole article about how important these women were politically, socially, economically. And not only were they the heart and soul of so much, I mean, the mayor needed a clean white shirt, who's gonna, but they didn't have washing machines. They had to be scientists. They had to know, that to go all the way back to making their own soap and stuff, putting bluing in the rinse and all those things. I can remember my mom doing that. And so anyway, we got a piece to, honor them. I got a couple of kind of abstract, African-inspired, if you will. Some people might say Cubist inspired, but then Cubism was inspired by African arts. So, there's enough to keep me off the street and out of mischief.
Gene, thank you for sharing your life, your art, and the history behind the work. Your story is exactly why this segment exists. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things. If you enjoy this conversation, do me a favor, like this video, subscribe, and leave a comment. Tell me what part of Gene's story stood out to you the most. Until next time.